What would you do if your own brother lived off you like a parasite, letting you break your back while he bragged and lied behind your back? For years I put up with it. I carried him on my shoulders, quietly swallowing the frustration, convincing myself I was doing the responsible thing. But one night something so small, so petty, turned into the most satisfying revenge I could have ever imagined. If you've ever had a sibling or a roommate take advantage of you, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and drop in the comments where you're listening from, because this one is for you. Now, let me take you back to when my patience finally ran out. Living with my brother was like carrying a weight I never agreed to lift. On paper, we were equals, two adults sharing an apartment. In reality, it was me paying, me shopping, me cleaning, me sacrificing. He wasn't my partner in survival. He was dead weight, a passenger lounging in the back seat while I drove through storms every single day. Let me paint you the picture. I woke up before sunrise every single weekday. The alarm would go off at 5 a.m., and for a few seconds I'd just stare at the ceiling, already tired before the day had even started. My body ached. My head pounded, but I forced myself out of bed, packed into trains so crowded you could barely breathe, and then sat through hours of traffic. 3 hours, sometimes 3.5, each way. By the time I got to work, I already felt like I'd lived an entire day. By the time I got home, I felt like I'd lived 2. And here's the kicker. By the time I stumbled back into our building, every shop was closed. The supermarkets, the bakery, the grocery store down the street, they all pulled down their shutters long before I even stepped off the train. If I needed something for the house, I had 2 choices: leave work early and risk my boss's patience, or buy overpriced junk at the all-night convenience store. And more often than not, I chose to sacrifice, because someone had to make sure the fridge wasn't empty. Someone had to make sure we had what we needed. And that someone was always me. Now let's compare that to my brother's life. His job, 2 minutes away, literally. He could roll out of bed, walk down the street, and be at work before I'd even made it to the train station. He had 3 supermarkets within 5 minutes, a bakery right across the street that filled the air with the smell of fresh bread every morning, and a big supermarket just 1 tram stop away. Convenience surrounded him like a buffet. But convenience means nothing when someone is lazy. Day after day he came home empty-handed. No milk, no bread, no vegetables, not even a pack of tissues. He'd walk into the apartment, flop onto the couch, and scroll on his phone while I dropped my bag by the door, exhausted, staring at the same bare shelves in the fridge. I remember one night in particular. My feet were killing me from the long commute. My shoulders ached from carrying heavy grocery bags. I stumbled into the kitchen and unpacked milk, bread, vegetables, toilet paper, cleaning supplies, all the basics. And as I set them down, I glanced at him. He was sprawled out on the couch, scrolling, chuckling at something on his phone. He didn't even look up. Didn't even say thank you. That was normal. But as bad as that was, the worst part wasn't his laziness. The worst part was his cruelty. Behind my back, he fed lies to our mother. He'd call her twisting the story so I looked like the bad guy. "He never helps around here," he'd say. "He makes me do everything. I don't know what I'm supposed to do anymore." And she believed him. She trusted his words more than my actions. So every time I answered the phone, it wasn't with kindness. It wasn't her asking how I was holding up. It was her nagging me. "Why aren't you helping your brother more? Why are you making things harder for him? You need to step up." Step up? I was the only one stepping at all. Do you know what that does to a person? It makes you feel invisible. It makes you feel like no matter what you do, no one notices, except to criticize. I wanted to scream at her, "Mom, I'm the one paying the bills. I'm the one shopping after 12-hour days. I'm the one keeping him afloat." But what good would it do? She had already chosen sides. And so I swallowed it. Every bitter word, every unfair accusation, every time she defended him and tore me down, I bit my tongue and kept moving. Because when you're exhausted, sometimes it feels easier to suffer quietly than to fight battles you know you'll lose. But resentment doesn't just disappear. It builds. It settles in your chest like heavy smoke, layer after layer, until it feels like you can't breathe. The crumbs he left on the counter after making himself a sandwich. The way he'd sigh, like I was asking for the world if I told him to take out the trash. The unopened mail piling up on the counter. The way he'd use the last of the milk and leave the empty carton in the fridge like it was someone else's problem. Small things, tiny things, but together they formed a mountain. And every day, that mountain pressed down harder on me. I'd sit on the train, staring out the window as the city blurred past and think to myself, why am I doing this? Why am I sacrificing my body, my sanity, for someone who wouldn't even cross the street to help me? Sometimes, on those endless rides home, I'd fantasize about just staying on the train, riding it past my stop, letting it carry me somewhere far away, anywhere but here. But I always got off, always walked back into the apartment, always picked up the slack, until the night when something inside me finally snapped. And strangely enough, it all started with toilet paper. The thing about resentment is that it doesn't explode all at once. It seeps in slowly, drop by drop, until one day you realize you're drowning. Living with my brother was like that. Every little slight, every lie, every selfish choice stacked up until my chest felt like it was full of bricks. It wasn't just the shopping, it was the entitlement. Every evening I came home drained from the commute, shoulders stiff, legs aching. My body felt like it had been through a grinder. I'd drop my bag by the door and scan the apartment, hoping, just once, to see a sign he'd done something. The trash, still overflowing. Dishes, piled high in the sink, the smell of dried food clinging to the air. Mail, stacked unopened on the counter, envelopes curling at the edges. And the fridge? Always the same story. Maybe a leftover container I'd bought days ago, but nothing new. He had walked past 3 supermarkets and a bakery on his way home, and somehow decided the better choice was to come straight in and sprawl on the couch. I'd stand there in the kitchen, staring at empty shelves, and feel my blood pressure rise. And then I'd hear it. The faint laugh from the living room. His voice chuckling at something on his phone. I was breaking my back, and he was scrolling memes. But somehow, in his twisted logic, I was still the one not doing enough. I'll never forget one phone call with Mom that nearly broke me. I'd barely walked in the door when my phone buzzed. Exhausted, I almost ignored it. But when I saw Mom flash across the screen, I sighed and answered. Hello? Her voice was sharp from the first word. Why are you making your brother do everything? He just called me. He sounds so stressed. You need to help more around the house. I froze in the doorway, bag still hanging off my shoulder. What? Mom, are you serious? I do all the shopping. She cut me off. He said, you leave everything to him? That you expect him to handle it all while you just come and go? I felt my jaw clench. My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles turned white. That's not true. I'm the one working 12-hour days, commuting 6 hours total. He works down the street. I buy the food, the cleaning supplies, everything. She sighed, dismissive, like she'd already decided I was lying. All I know is he sounds overwhelmed. You need to step up. You can't just dump everything on him. Step up. Those words cut deeper than she realized. Step up. I was dragging us both forward every single day while he coasted. I wanted to yell. I wanted to scream into the phone until she finally understood. But what good would it do? He had poisoned the well. No matter what I said, she believed him. He was her poor, overworked son. I was the selfish one. When the call ended, I stood in the hallway, staring at nothing. My chest felt tight. My throat burned. I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. Instead, I took a deep breath, dropped my bag on the floor, and went straight to the kitchen to start dinner. Because what else was I supposed to do? And this wasn't a one-time thing. It happened again and again. Why aren't you helping more? Why are you making things so hard on your brother? You need to grow up and take responsibility. Each accusation was a dagger. And every time I hung up, my brother would glance at me with this smug little smirk, like he knew he had won. It's hard to describe what that does to you. Imagine sacrificing your evenings, your paycheck, your sanity, and then being told you're the problem. You start questioning yourself. Maybe I am failing. Maybe I should be doing more. But deep down, I knew the truth. He was manipulating us both. And still, I kept going, because when you're exhausted, sometimes it feels easier to keep sacrificing than to fight. But the cracks were showing. I started noticing the little things more than I ever had before. The crumbs he left on the counter after making himself a snack. Like cleaning up was beneath him. The way he'd sigh loudly, theatrically, if I asked him to do something as small as taking out the trash. The way he'd drain the last of the milk, shove the empty carton back into the fridge and walk away as if it would magically refill itself. Each of these moments gnawed at me. On their own, maybe they were small. But together, they painted a picture of someone who didn't just rely on me. He disrespected me. He saw my effort as his right, not my choice. And it wasn't just about the house, it was about dignity. Sometimes, sitting on the train, staring out the window, I'd imagine confronting him. I'd picture myself standing tall in the living room, telling him I was done, that he'd have to fend for himself. In my head, I saw him crumble, finally admitting how much he relied on me. But every time I walked through that door, too tired to argue, I swallowed the fantasy. I unpacked groceries, scrubbed dishes, and collapsed into bed, ready to repeat it all again the next day. Until one night, something shifted. It wasn't a screaming fight. It wasn't a dramatic blow-up. It was something so ordinary, so ridiculous, that I almost laughed when I realized it. Toilet paper. I noticed we were running low. Normally, that thought would set off alarm bells in my head. I'd feel a wave of panic, already calculating how I'd have to leave work early to grab some, or pay extra at the midnight store. But this time, I just stared at the roll and thought, no, not this time. For once, I wasn't going to rescue him. I wasn't going to inconvenience myself after a grueling commute just so he could continue pretending he lived in a magical apartment where supplies appeared out of thin air. He worked 2 minutes away. He walked past shops every single day. If he couldn't be bothered to grab something as basic as toilet paper, then he could face the consequences. I stood in the bathroom, staring at that nearly empty roll, and for the first time in years, I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind of smile that comes from relief, the kind that whispers, finally. Because deep down, I think a part of me knew. This was the crack in the system. The moment the freeloading world he'd built for himself would finally collapse, even if just a little. And the timing, as it turned out, couldn't have been more perfect. What I didn't know was that he had invited a friend over that weekend. He hadn't told me. He never did. But that one missing roll of toilet paper, that pazathos, was about to expose everything. By the time the weekend rolled around, I was running on fumes. My body ached from another week of brutal commutes. My mind was foggy, and all I wanted to do was collapse into bed and sleep for 12 hours straight. But there was one thought sitting in the back of my head like a ticking clock. We were out of toilet paper. Normally, that knowledge would have gnawed at me until I caved. I would have left the apartment, gone to the corner shop, paid too much money for something so basic, and saved us from embarrassment. That was always the pattern. I'd inconvenience myself. He'd stay comfortable, and nothing would change. But this time, I didn't budge. I let the roll dwindle down to nothing. For once, I thought, he can handle it. After all, He worked 2 minutes away. He had shops on every corner. Why should I, the one who traveled across the city like a pack mule every day, be the one to fix this? So I stayed put. And that's when karma decided to write the punchline for me. Because my dear brother, in his infinite wisdom, had failed to mention one small but critical detail. He was having a friend over that weekend. I only realized when the front door swung open Saturday afternoon and laughter spilled down the hallway. 2 voices, not one. Shoes clattered against the floor, a bag dropped, and I heard my brother's fake, cool guy persona kick into gear. You know the type. His voice got louder, smoother, like he was auditioning for a role. He cracked jokes, laughed a little too hard, talked like he had it all together. I sat in the kitchen, listening, rolling my eyes. It was pathetic, really. Here was a guy who couldn't even be bothered to replace a toilet paper roll, pretending to be some kind of suave host. Fine, I thought. Let him play his little game, not my problem. Until a few minutes later, it became very much my problem. Because that's when I heard it. A voice from the bathroom, muffled but perfectly clear. Hey, where's the toilet paper? The entire apartment went silent. I swear I could feel the tension snap like a rubber band. My brother's footsteps hurried down the hall, his voice sharp but nervous. What do you mean? It's in there. Another pause, then his friend again, this time louder, a little more desperate. No, man. There's nothing here. Where do you keep it? I leaned against the kitchen counter, biting back a smile. This was it. The moment I hadn't even realized I'd been waiting for. My brother's voice grew louder, edged with panic now. Hey, where's the toilet paper? He barked, like I was his personal servant. And that's when I delivered the line I'd been waiting for. Calm, collected, almost innocent. Where are you asking me? It's always in the bathroom. If it's not there, then there's none. Silence. A long, uncomfortable silence that stretched across the apartment like a heavy curtain. In my mind, I could picture it perfectly. His friend sitting awkwardly on the toilet, pants around his ankles, realizing there was no way out without my brother saving him. My brother standing frozen in the hallway, humiliated, scrambling for a solution. Normally I would have rushed to cover for him. I would have been embarrassed for both of us, maybe even sprinted out the door to grab some. But this time, I stood my ground. I let the silence do the work. Finally, the bathroom door creaked open. I heard awkward shuffling, the sound of someone whispering something I couldn't quite catch. My brother muttered something under his breath, furious, before stomping toward the front door. He yanked his jacket off the hook, slammed the door so hard the walls rattled, and disappeared into the street. I laughed. I couldn't help it. The sound burst out of me, years of swallowed frustration finally spilling over. Because here's the thing. His friend wasn't just embarrassed. My brother was embarrassed. He had invited someone into the house to see him play host, to watch him act like he had it all under control. And in the one moment that mattered, when something as simple as toilet paper exposed the truth, he had no choice but to face it. For the first time, he had to deal with life without me quietly covering his tracks. And it wasn't pretty. The silence that followed was almost comical. His friend shuffled out of the bathroom a minute later, red-faced, eyes glued to the floor. He muttered, I'll just wait for him to get back, and retreated to the living room like a soldier retreating from a lost battle. I poured myself a glass of water, leaned against the counter, and sipped slowly, savoring the moment. Inside, I was glowing. It wasn't just funny, it was justice. Sweet, poetic justice. 20 minutes later, the door slammed open. My brother stomped in, plastic shopping bag swinging from his hand. He didn't look at me. He didn't say a word. He beelined straight for the bathroom, ripped open the bag, and slammed the new pack of toilet paper down like it was some grand victory. His friend chuckled nervously, trying to lighten the mood, but the damage was already done. The cool, put-together mask my brother wore around other people shattered. His friend had seen the cracks, seen the reality. And I didn't have to lift a finger. That night, after his friend finally left, my brother stormed into my room. His face was red, his voice shaking with anger. "You knew we were out. You did this on purpose." I shrugged, calm as ever. "Did what? If the toilet paper isn't there, it means there's none. You live here too. You could have bought it days ago." And that was it. He had no comeback, no way to twist the story this time. The look on his face, frustration, humiliation, the realization that he couldn't spin it onto me, was priceless. And the best part? I hadn't even planned it as revenge. It had happened naturally, a perfect storm of his laziness, my exhaustion, and his terrible timing. But the effect? Far better than anything I could have planned. For once I wasn't the powerless one. For once he was the one scrambling, embarrassed, forced to clean up his own mess. And man, did it feel good. What followed was spectacular. The slam of the bathroom door echoed through the apartment like thunder. My brother had finally returned with the toilet paper, a cheap plastic bag clutched in his hand like it was some kind of trophy. He didn't look at me. He didn't acknowledge me. He just charged down the hallway, tossed the pack onto the bathroom counter, and muttered curses under his breath as though somehow I was the one who had humiliated him. His friend chuckled awkwardly from the living room, the sound brittle, the kind of laugh people force when they don't know what else to do. It's fine, man," I heard him say. "Don't worry about it." But I knew better. That moment had already carved itself into both their minds. His friend had seen behind the curtain. The host who pretended to have everything under control had been exposed by something as simple as toilet paper. I leaned back against the counter, sipping my water, watching as my brother stormed past me without a word. And in that silence, I realized something important. I didn't need to rub it in. I didn't need to say a thing. His anger, his humiliation, it was already eating him alive. Dinner that night was tense. His friend sat at the table, poking at his food, clearly trying to pretend nothing had happened. My brother shoved bites into his mouth like he was trying to chew away his own frustration. He barely looked up, and when he did, his eyes flicked to me with a sharpness that made it clear he wanted to blame me for everything. But I kept my poker face. I ate slowly, calmly, like I didn't have a care in the world. Inside, though, I was savoring every second. Because I knew what was happening in his head. He was replaying the scene. His friend's awkward voice calling from the bathroom, his own panicked footsteps, my calm, cutting line, "If it's not there, then there's none." The silence that followed. The way he'd had to run out into the street like a kid caught unprepared, while his guest sat embarrassed in our living room. That image would haunt him far longer than anything I could say out loud. At one point, his friend tried to strike up a casual conversation. "So, work been busy for you guys?" he asked, glancing between us. I nodded, polite. "Yeah, long commute though. About 3 hours each way. By the time I get home, the stores are closed. But hey, someone's got to make sure the fridge is full." I didn't look at my brother when I said it. I didn't need to. The words hung in the air like smoke. His fork froze halfway to his mouth. His jaw clenched. His friend gave a weak laugh. "That's rough, man. I don't know how you do it." I shrugged. "You get used to it. Responsibility doesn't care if you're tired." That was all I said. But I didn't miss the way my brother shifted in his seat, uncomfortable, cheeks flushing red. He hated that I didn't have to raise my voice to make my point. I didn't have to accuse him or humiliate him directly. All I had to do was calmly tell the truth. And with his friend sitting right there, he couldn't twist it, couldn't spin it into another one of his lies. When dinner ended, his friend thanked me quietly, avoided eye contact with my brother, and left earlier than expected. The silence that filled the apartment after the door shut was thick enough to choke on. I started clearing the dishes, calm and methodical, stacking them by the sink. Behind me, I heard the shuffle of his footsteps, short, sharp, angry. Finally, he snapped. "You knew," he spat, his voice low but trembling with rage. You knew we were out, and you let me look like an idiot in front of him. I turned slowly, towel in my hands, and met his glare. My voice was steady. Knew what? The toilet paper's always in the bathroom. If it's not there, it means there's none. You live here too. You could have bought it days ago. His face went red. His fists clenched at his sides. For a second, I thought he might actually hit me. But he didn't. He just stood there, shaking, his mouth opening and closing like he was searching for words that wouldn't come. And then, silence. He stormed off to his room, slammed the door, and left me alone in the kitchen. I finished the dishes in peace. For the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt in this apartment. Power. Not power over him, but power over myself. The weight I'd been carrying, the endless shopping, the endless nagging, the endless covering for him, suddenly felt lighter. Because in that one moment, I'd realized something. I didn't have to fight him. I didn't have to argue with him. All I had to do was stop enabling him. All I had to do was step back and let his own laziness destroy the image he worked so hard to fake. That night, lying in bed, I heard him pacing in the living room. Back and forth, the floor creaking under his feet. He was stewing, replaying everything, burning with the humiliation of it all. And the more I listened, the more I smiled. Because the beauty of this revenge wasn't in what I did. It was in what I didn't do. I didn't cover for him. I didn't rush to fix the problem. I didn't shield him from the consequences of his own neglect. For once he had to face the reality of the world he'd created. And he hated it. The sweetest revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel. It was silent. It was letting him feel for the first time the weight I'd been carrying all along. And I slept that night better than I had in years. When I lay down that night, the silence of the apartment felt different. Not the suffocating silence of resentment I'd grown used to, but a calm one. For the first time in years, I wasn't going to bed with my teeth clenched and my stomach in knots. Instead, I was smiling. Not because I had humiliated him, not because of some elaborate plan, but because I had finally stopped playing the role he forced me into. I had stopped carrying him. As I lay there, staring at the ceiling, I thought back to everything that had led me here. The endless commutes, the heavy bags cutting into my hands, the long phone calls with Mom where I stood silently accused of crimes I never committed. The crumbs on the counter, the empty milk cartons, the way he smirked when Mom believed his lies. All of it had piled up like bricks on my chest, and for so long I had carried that weight without question. But one missing roll of toilet paper changed everything. It sounds ridiculous, doesn't it, that something so small could be the turning point. But that's the thing about life. It's rarely the big moments that break you. It's the small ones, the ordinary ones. The last straw isn't always dramatic. It's quiet. A little piece of paper, a silent choice, a decision not to act. And the irony? My revenge wasn't even intentional. I hadn't plotted it out. I hadn't sat in the kitchen rubbing my hands together waiting for him to suffer. I was just tired. Too tired to keep sacrificing myself for someone who couldn't be bothered to lift a finger. Too tired to keep enabling him. Too tired to keep being the invisible hand that made his world comfortable. So I stopped, and the moment I did, his world collapsed in the most embarrassing way possible. And the best part? His friend was there to see it. For years, my brother had lived behind a mask. To Mom, he was the victim. To his friends, he was the easygoing, put-together guy. To himself, he was untouchable. But one missing roll of toilet paper tore that mask away. His friend had seen the truth. He had seen the panic, the scramble, the humiliation. He had seen the cracks in the facade, and once someone sees the truth, you can't cover it back up. That's what made it so satisfying. Because for once, I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to argue. I didn't need to prove myself. The truth had done it for me. As I lay there listening to him pace the living room, I realized something important. People like my brother only get away with freeloading, with manipulating, with disrespecting, because someone else allows it. Because someone else keeps cleaning up the mess, covering the tracks, carrying the weight. The second you stop, their whole world crumbles. And that's what happened here. It wasn't about toilet paper. It was about justice, balance. Finally, letting him feel the weight I'd carried for so long. The next morning, the apartment was awkwardly quiet. He didn't look me in the eye. He moved around like a storm cloud, muttering under his breath, slamming cabinets louder than necessary. But it didn't matter, because no matter how angry he was, no matter how much he tried to blame me, he knew the truth. His friend knew it too. And me, I felt lighter. For years, I had let him drain me, not just physically, but emotionally. I had let him control the narrative, control Mom's opinion, control how I saw myself. But not anymore. Sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't about making the other person suffer. It's about setting yourself free. It's about finally saying, no more. And the universe, in its own twisted sense of humor, will often make sure that when you do, the timing is perfect. One missing roll of toilet paper became the loudest statement I had ever made. And I'll tell you this, I've never laughed harder in my life. So if you've ever felt used, overlooked, or taken for granted, maybe this story hits home for you. Maybe you've carried someone else's weight while they pretended you were the problem. Maybe you've stayed quiet while someone else took credit for your work, twisted the truth, or leaned on you until you broke. And if you have, maybe you know this feeling. The moment you stop, the moment you set the weight down and let them stumble under their own laziness, the moment you realize you were never powerless, you were just too tired to see it. That's all revenge really is sometimes. Not elaborate plans, not dramatic confrontations, just letting people taste the consequences of their own actions. And trust me, it tastes better than anything else. Before we wrap up, let me ask you, would you have handled it the same way? Would you have let him face that humiliation? Or would you have stepped in and saved him from it? If this story gave you that satisfying sense of karma, smash that like button, subscribe for more real stories of revenge, betrayal, and justice, and tell me in the comments, what's the pettiest revenge you've ever pulled off? Because sometimes, the smallest victories feel the sweetest.